Good evening and welcome to the continuation of the University of Rhode Island 2021 Black History Month Annual Observance, sponsored by the Department of Africana Studies, the College of Arts and Sciences, and the Multicultural Student Services Center. Tonight we have the next generation, a wonderful panel discussion by several amazing alumni. Thank you for joining us. This is the 2021 University of Rhode Island Black History Month Observance.
Nobody is going to ever replace the capacity of a human. And this is why thinking is our number one obsession.
A College of Arts and Sciences education gives you the confidence to bring together all the strands that you value and apply them in ways that are fulfilling for you as an individual, but also resonate out.
You have to really look at schools as a place to grow as yourself. And I think that URI does a great job of that.
There's a sense of pride in the work that you put out there. Students are just excited. Whatever field they're in, they want to be the best at it. And I think that's kind of infectious.
The thing that sets URI apart is that we as a faculty and as an institution ask our students not just what you can do, but who can you be?
I am Dr. Vanessa Winder Quainoo, Associate Professor and Chairperson of Africana Studies. Again, welcome. Tonight's feature is called The Next Generation, a panel discussion with 7 amazing University of Rhode Island Africana Studies alumni. Before turning to our panel, I would like to express our sincerest gratitude to several individuals. Dr. David Dooley, President of the University of Rhode Island. Dr. Don DeHaze, Provost of the University. Dr. Gifty Ako Adonvo, Vice President for Global Initiatives and Senior International Officer of the University. Dr. Mary Grace Almandrez, Associate Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer. Dr. Jen Riley, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Dr. Christopher Hunter, Associate Dean and Chairperson of the Faculty and Staff Association of the African Diaspora. Dr. Norman Barber, this year's chairperson of the Black History Month Planning Committee. Anne Salzarulo McGinn, an incredible and most resourceful colleague for all of her hard work. And Leah Cooper for her IT and design genius. Ms. Leslie Dancy, the Africana Studies Administrative Assistant. And we are indebted to all of our students, alumni, current students, and future students. And of course, you, our audience. Our honored guest this week for the entire Black History Month observance during this entire week has been the Africana Studies faculty, my esteemed colleagues who are committed to teaching Black history, building racial understanding, equity, justice, and Pan-African and global education and opportunity. They include Dr. Paul Anderer, Dr. Norman Barber, Dr. Ray Ferguson, Dr. Gatahi Gatiti, Dr. Emmett Goods, Dr. Angel Green, Dr. James Hale, Dr. Shanette Harris, Dr. Carnell Jones, Dr. John McCrae, Dr. Marcus Nevius, Professor Barry O'Connor, Dr. Joseph Quainoo, Assistant Dean Earl Smith, Dr. Rob Waddell, and Professor Gerald Williams. Again, thank you for joining us this evening. It promises to be a lively conversation with 7 amazing alumni. Here to introduce our moderator and host for the evening, Dr. Norman Barber.
Thank you, Dr. Quainoo. Tonight's moderator and panel discussion leader is Dr. William Okello. He graduated from the University of Rhode Island in 2012. As a graduate student, he worked in the Department of Africana Studies, where he served as a mentor for many students of color and provided leadership to various student clubs and organizations. One of the mentees that he had characterized him as an articulate and sensitive individual to whom younger students could look up to. Much appreciated. After graduating from URI, Dr. Wilson Okello earned his Ph.D. in educational leadership at Miami University. He was drawn to higher education because of his interdisciplinary nature. Since then, his teaching, research, and service explores the complexities of Africana literacy, feminist, and performance studies. Currently, he serves as an assistant professor in the Watson College of Education at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. Please join me in welcoming our moderator, Dr. Willem Okello.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barber, Dr. Quainoo, the entire College of Arts and Sciences, the entire planning community. Thank you all so much for this opportunity. It is a privilege and an honor to join you. Our task, if we are to be successful this evening, would not be to resolve the conditions of African and African descended people in and across the diaspora. Indeed, the questions of life and living, of joy and thriving, beg and demand something of us. I want to invite us on this evening to trouble the feel-good notions of progress with what Sonia Sanchez, her clairvoyance 1974 articulation, how does it free us? I think Sister Sanchez, she imagined a moment in some distant future where it would be possible for a few Black alumni to gather, but the masses of dark people, as Dr. Howard Thurman reminds us, live with their backs against the wall, with little power to tame the lash or to hold out indefinitely, to fight back when one feels crushed, or to make meaning of the relentless assaults on their spirit. I want to invite us to look hard on this evening without turning away at the social and the political institutions that could send a sister to the White House in DC and condemn a brother to death in Rochester. It's fine if we talk about progress, but we have to be willing to do something more with it, to pull it apart, to hold it up to the light, to interrogate it, to ask the what, the why, and the how, again, of it, how it gets us free. My mother, she would do this. I can remember my mother doing this when we were younger. My mother, she had an understanding of the long game, right? She started fighting for my siblings and I when we were young. She was a creator of worlds in and through her prayers. I would come upstairs in the morning and I would see my mother folded over the couch in prayers. Years later, she would go on to say, Wilson, I used to dream about what you all were going to be. I used to dream that you would leave your mark on the world. What I heard in that all these years later was a hope that resides deep in the spirits of Black women for centuries, that is measured against the reality of what it means to exist for some Black people in the world. What I heard from my mother was, Wilson, I want you to be free. But your freedom is different. Yeah, it's not the freedom granted to our white brothers and sisters. It's not a freedom without consequence. It's not a freedom without criticism. It's not the freedom to be proud and ignorant. It's not a freedom to profit off of people in one moment and abandon them in the next. It's not the freedom to stand ground. It's not the freedom without responsibility. It's not a freedom without hard memory. It's not a Monticello without slavery type of freedom. It's not a Confederate freedom. It's not the freedom of a John C. Calhoun. No, yours, Wilson. Your freedom is a Harriet Tubman type of freedom, which calls on you to risk your own. Yours is a Nat Turner type of freedom. It's a Fannie Lou Hamer type of freedom spirit that says we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. On tonight, family, we're not interested in theorizing, but theorizing's sake. Right? We don't want to traffic in these tropes of Black respectability, nor are we here to say uncritically that we made it so that you can make it too. I'm not interested in ideological frameworks that intend to make us palatable to white institutions. And if you feel a tinge in your spirit, I say that, I can't offer an apology for that. It means that we as a people, as a collective nation, are so unfamiliar with what it means to center Blackness that the thought of it makes us nervous. It makes us pause. It makes us uneasy. I want to challenge you to log off just yet, because freedom is a practice. Thinking Black, thinking Africana is a practice. And if we are to meditate on, to imagine on behalf of African and African descendant folk, we must dare to participate in a freedom praxis. I submit to you that we have some questions that need to be answered on this evening that we as Black folk need to grapple with, and I brought some help to be able to do that. Allow me to introduce a fearless and a dynamic panel of Africana Studies alumni, beginning with Luckson, Omoaregbo, apologies, class of 2016 and class of 2018. Luckson is featured in the COM 100 custom textbook introduction to communications, doing what he does best, helping students to adjust to the rigor of academic life. He's remembered fondly as a campus leader. Luckson is now the director of the College Access Program with College Visions. Welcome, Luckson.
Thank you.
Next, we have Alice Odhiambo, class of 2011. Alice was active at URI as a leader in student services and an undergrad and grad student in the Africana Studies department. Her family ties to URI include her mother, who was honored for her groundbreaking work in the sciences in their homeland of Kenya. Alice is now a public relations manager for a marketing strategist for the global ministry of Glen Tabernacle Church in New York City. Welcome, Alice.
Thank you.
Next, we have Pastor Matthew Aaron Quainoo, excelled at URI. Graduating in 2 years, he received the honor of his fellow classmates as the first African-American class speaker for his graduation. At heart, Matthew is a servant leader, and he's happy to serve as the senior pastor of Solid Rock Church in Kissimmee, Florida. He is a Ph.D. student in the history program at Howard University. Welcome, Matthew. Next, we have Pastor Timothy Quainoo, who was the first campus pastor of Sankofa Ministry, the first ministry at URI that was organized for students of African ancestry. He's respected widely by his peers. Tim has served in several churches in leadership development as a speaker for many conferences and workshops. He was the interim senior pastor at Living Water Church in Bolingbrook, Illinois. Currently serves as the senior pastor of Hill City Church in Providence, Rhode Island, and as the director of admissions at College Unbound in Providence, Rhode Island. Welcome, Timothy. Next, we have Steph Oliveira, who was an extraordinary attentive student at URI, graduating in the class of 2020. She excelled at academics, establishing herself as a leader among her classmates. She was active in the Black student organizations and assisted the Africana Studies staff by volunteering at events. Several of her professors agree Steph was an excellent student, never shying away from critically difficult issues. Today, Steph is a third Marshall Scholar in the MBA program at Florida A&M University. Welcome, Steph. And finally, we have Oluwadomilol Animashaun, class of 2016. He's remembered as a loyal friend, an ardent supporter of Africana Studies, affectionately called Dami. He excelled academically, receiving top honors in political science and Africana Studies as a senior. As one of his political science professors recalls, Dami is an exceptional person. As a student, he was very astute, understanding issues of justice and equity. Currently, he's completing his work in the JD program at Howard University School of Law.
Thank you.
So I won't belabor the point. We're excited to hear from our panelists on this evening, and we'll go ahead and jump right in. I want to sort of guide our discussion thematically. So we'll move in and across this notion of memory. We'll talk about remembering and what does it mean to sort of piece back together things that have been torn apart. We'll think about agency, and then we'll conclude with this notion of sort of dreaming and imagining futures. And so to begin, a simple question for our panelists. Help me to historicize and really to begin to contextualize the moment that we're in. Talk to me about the state of Black people. More specifically, let's talk about Black institutions. We can think about the church, education, family, but help me to historicize and contextualize the moment. And let's go ahead and begin with Matthew, Pastor Quainoo. Help me to historicize and contextualize the moment. What's the state of Black people and Black institutions?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Okello, for just setting the contours for this conversation with inimitable eloquence and elocution, which is just so you. No one can quite say it like you, brother. So thank you so much. And certainly honored and grateful to the Africana Studies Department for the invitation. Grateful to be with such an illustrious coterie of colleagues. When thinking about where we are as a Black community, my mind goes to a quotation from Van Jones, where he talked about anytime there being racial progress or Black progress, there's always a white lash. And I think if we're going to historicize this moment, really, and we can't do justice to it with the time that we have, but I would begin with just saying the more things change, the more things stay the same. There is a menacing cyclicality to this moment that we're in. The idea that we're still on a plantation right now. Rhode Island, the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, literally is the official name of our state, and there is contestation around that, it being changed. I'm not sure if the laws have changed of late, but when I was a student at URI, that was the case. You don't have to read Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, to know that there is a strange trajectory and mutation of racism. Thank you, but the laws have changed as of now. But listen, I'm thinking about 1776, this great declaration around all men are created equal. Thomas Jefferson, who owns 100 slaves, is over 500,000 enslaved people, Black people during that period of time while he pens those words. And yet, this great war for freedom, Black people are the first ones taking the bullet. I'm thinking of even the Rhode Island Regiment in 1775. And so we see this great pursuit of freedom. In 1780, we get the first Free African Society in Newport. And then in 1787, we see a similar one come into being in Philly. And yet here comes the white lash, 1793, the fugitive slave law. Same thing happens in the 19th century with this great civil war that, again, Lincoln did not free the slaves. They turned towards Black people because they were losing the war. We fought for this nation. We're the only people that take a bullet for this nation and bullets from this nation.
Come on.
And after the Civil War, then we get what Rayford Logan, the Howard historian, calls it a deer. We get lynching, 1950, the birth of a nation, all of that. And then come on into the 20th century, we have King and the Civil Rights Movement, which I don't want to talk about King because y'all have, in the words of Cornel West, deodorized King, right? Let's talk about Prathia Hall, right? Let's talk about Septima Clark. Let's talk about Daisy Bates. Let's talk about Claudia Colvin. Right? But even after we get, Brown v. Board in 64, with the Civil Rights Act and then the Voting Rights Act of 65, we get the Southern strategy, a white lash, right? Then after Obama, this great symbolic victory, it's not a structural victory. We get a Trumper tantrum, okay, in the emergence of Make America Hate Again. And so I think that, hey, URI has a new Black department. I'm waiting for the white lash. And I think that's what constitutes this moment.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Luckson, jump in here. Help me to contextualize this moment. Pastor Quainoo, he sets the context for us. He traces the history of Rhode Island in a beautiful way, in the history of this nation, situates it in the history of this nation. Talk to me about this particular moment that we're in.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Again, echoing Dr. Quainoo's words about how we started this, which is amazing. And so I want to pick up on something Dr. Quainoo was talking about the symbol of the first Black, the first African, the first individual in this nation to take the mantle of president on the bully pulpit that we do call the United States of America's White House, and think about what that, I think, ignited in the Black community. I think we're still feeling the reverberations of that, coupling that with the mass shootings and couple that with the death of Black and brown folks in the arms of the police, right? So I think these two things are providing a perspective for Black folks in the nation today, right? So we're thinking about how, as activists, we can create change within the systems and outside of systems. So you have folks who are looking at President Barack Obama as the symbol of, okay, we are at this moment of Blackness where we can kind of take power and claim agency in the political system and utilize politics to better our lives. And then you have folks who are looking at activism as the answer in doing that, right? So I think that Black, especially young Black people, are really torn between these two things, right? Are we going to change the plight of Blackness to make it work for every Black person through the politics, right? Are we going to run for office? Are we going to try to join city councils? Are we going to try join school committees and then make our way up into Congress and the White House, or even local politics itself? Are we going to use that as a way to change it, or are we going to do it on an individual level in the community, just trying to touch one person or another? So I think that a lot of young Black people, young Black folks, from my understanding, are really caught between the two. Like, what is the best way? And obviously, like, politics, I think is, it's been framed as the best way to go about doing things, right? But I think today, folks will argue maybe not, right? And so I think thinking about President Barack Obama being the first Black president and how that can be a tool, although we understand as a neoliberal, he was a tool, right? Some folks will argue he was a tool by white supremacy in one way or the other to help us get to Donald Trump. Is it politics going to be the way, or are we going to go about it on the grassroots level using activism as a way to kind of change our situation?
I appreciate those thoughts, Luckson, as you really sort of begin to help us think about the different pathways, perhaps, to this notion, this idea of progress. And you really sort of call us to think about institutions, right? You think about sort of politics or government as, let's consider it an institution, but also sort of grassroots institutions and what Black people are building and what have the capacity to build. And so, Pastor Tim Quainoo, help us to understand the state of really sort of Black institutions. And as you do so, without attempting to really define what progress is, can you help us think about what metrics or analytics, right, should inform or direct our understandings of progress in and through Black institutions?
My brother, Dr. Okello, it's a joy and an honor to share the stage with you all, my people, tonight. God bless you. So glad to be here with y'all. And to Dr. Quainoo, Dr. Barber, to all of the illustrious scholars and leaders and thinkers at the University of Rhode Island who helped to form those of us who share this space tonight. We're so honored and grateful. Y'all know we come from honor culture. We are people of the soil, and thankful to be in this space. When we think about institutions, Black folk have a complicated relationship with institutions. It's been part of how we have been in the process of defining ourselves. Institutions like the NAACP, institutions like our historically Black colleges and universities, institutions like the Black Church. Shout out to Dr. Henry Louis Gates, who just put out the Black Church special on PBS. Right, we've got these centers, these gathering places where Black culture has put stakes in the ground, and yet at the same time, these institutions have always seemed to be disconnected at some level in some way from grassroots. There's always been some sort of an undercurrent that feels outside of the influence or the reach or not fully represented, which points to this. I set it up this way to say this, that for Black folk in America, we're not a monolith. We're not a single story. Shout out to Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. We're so much more than just one. And so because of that, in order to talk about progress, we cannot talk about one picture. We cannot talk about one definition. We have to look at a rising tide that lifts all of the boats. In order to see that, what we need to start seeing is a decentralization of power. And so what we've seen in the Black Lives Matter movement is a picture of the future for Black success on this particular land and Black success throughout the diaspora, is that more and more Black folks must be empowered, must take their power, must take their stance to be able to determine a future of their own visioning. And so I think the less we look to a particular institution to define for the rest of us, but the more that institutions invite individuals to co-create and to collaborate so that our futures are as diverse and follow as many different visions as are representative of our people, we will begin to see the wheels of progress turning in the many different ways that reflect all of us.
Powerful, powerful. Thank you so much, Pastor Tim Quainoo. I love what you talk about as this notion of sort of co-creating, and what does it mean to sort of bring people into institutions to really sort of determine futures of our own making, right? Less about the institution, more about the individual. Alice, I see you, and I want you to jump in this conversation. And as Pastor Tim points to a disconnect, help us think about what remembering might look like, and remembering as sort of this piecing back together of things that have been separated out or detached. Cynthia Dillard might say, what has endured for Black people as we move across space and time? What has endured? Yeah. What should we hold on to as we think about sort of crafting this moment and future?
Sure. Firstly, I want to say thank you so much for the introduction, Dr. Okello, and for Professor Barber and Professor Quainoo, the University of Rhode Island. In Kenya, we would say all protocol observed. So that is what we would say to mention all the different people that took part and have higher statuses than me. So as a Kenyan, I will just say, all protocol observed. But when I think of preservation, I think of the things that are tangible, right? So I think of culture in terms of music, food, art, right? I remember growing up in Kenya and learning family recipes and learning about my family in the kitchen, right? So I know how to make certain foods, Kenyan foods, because it was taught to me in the kitchen by my aunties and my older relatives, and not because I learned it in a textbook or in school. And so food is a way, for me, food is everything. And if you think about what America is as a melting pot, we all love food. Everyone has one cuisine that is not their own, that they're just like, you know what, tonight I want Thai, tonight I want Indian, tonight I want, Mexican or whatever it is, right? And so that is how I see that culture has been able to be, and traditions have ultimately been able to be passed down, and stories have been able to be told. Because if you look into the American history, there was once a point when the slaves were banned from learning how to read or write. So they had to get creative in how they were able to pass down things. So they was either passed down through song, through dance, through story, through food. And you see that in our culture today. The best example that you want to find of the most integrated Black family is in America, go to a cookout and you will find every different generation sitting there talking, regardless of how educated you are, how well off you are financially. Everyone has come to this one table as we are one. Outside of what everyone else thinks of, together we are one. And this is how we preserve who we are. So we sit down and we listen down to us. And we realize that, okay, the hardships that my parents went through or my grandparents went through may not be as different as what I'm going through now. It just has a different title. For our parents, it may have been, getting into university. For us, it's a matter of like, how fast can we climb up into the corporate ladder in our jobs? we don't know what it's going to be like for our children. But if you look back into a lot of our struggles, history tends to repeat itself. And even if you go into a lot of who Black people are in America and outside of America, faith and religion has been such a guiding path into who we are, into how much we endure, how much we are able to fight back against the powers that are against us. But it also gives us a tool of knowing that this too shall pass, you know, and whatever struggles we are going through, it will pass. I think of the kids right now who are at university and they're doing it virtually. When I went to school, this wasn't a thing. Like I actually like walked down the quad, and I went to the NCC, or I could walk into Professor Quainoo's office and sit down and have a conversation with her. But now the kids are doing it via Zoom, but this too shall pass. You know, we are now going into a new normal. And as history has shown us, we have learned how to adapt as people and continue on. And so even right now, even though our institutions are changing, the ways that we are carrying ourselves are changing, the questions that we are bringing to the table are changing, and they're also like rocking our foundation. I think that really is who we are. And ultimately, if we continue with what we know, if we continue with our music, if we continue with our arts, if we continue with our language and our food, our culture will continue to get passed down, but it will adapt to the time that it needs to. And so I just think that is the way that has been and will continue to be.
Yeah, we could sit there all night. That's a good word. That's a good word that you're preaching on this evening. Thank you for reminding us about the lessons in food and culture, in music and art. Right, my mind goes back to the Black women and Black feminist consciousness, particularly this Black feminist theorizing that happened in and around the kitchen table. Right, kitchen table press. Black women established when there wasn't press willing to sort of take on their works. Right, this sort of magic that's happening in our homes. Right, and so you're taking us. I appreciate your theorizing and what you're calling us to. Adami, I want to bring you in. Have we gotten away from what Alice is pointing to? Have we gotten away from that? Perhaps let me ask you this way: how have Black people been seduced? What have we been taught to forget? How have we perhaps let go of some of the things that have held us up over time? Where is this happening, and how has that happened?
I'd like to first thank you, the University of Rhode Island. Everybody has done all the remarks before, but I also want to thank God. I'm a Christian first and foremost, so that's why I gotta start off. But I also am part of a great tradition, great Yoruba religious tradition. So I also am aware of the ancestors. I'm also aware that they're with us at this moment. So that's what I want to invoke at the moment and pronounce. What do we forget? For me, I think it really begins with understanding we're African peoples. I think we have done ourselves such a disservice, and it's obviously because of white supremacy and the invasion of white supremacy and white peoples that we have disremembered that we are connected to a continent with thousands of different nation states, thousands of different peoples and people groups. And I think from there, we have to always try to contextualize our even our current situation, that if we remember where we're from, one author speaks about, we don't know where we're going unless we know where we're from, right? We have to remember that we are African peoples connected to other African people. So if you're Jamaican, if you Haitian, if you're African American, at the end of the day, you're an African person. And I think from there, we can find ourselves some strength, some much needed strength. Obviously, we don't start, and this is kind of an attack on white supremacy ideology, right? Africans didn't start as Africans, right? We're different nation groups where we're beefing, having problems with each other, fighting, doing what humans have done throughout history. And yet in some ways, and it's going to be an interesting comment that some of my friends might get mad at, white supremacists have given us an advantage, right? They have, through that, they've created Africa. Through that, they pushed us to other parts of the world, and we can use the different types of things we have learned through while we have been colonialized, while we're facing racial oppression, what we have learned about people who are, is this some feedback in the back? Okay. What we have learned with people who have oppressed us, I think there are narratives and stories in which we can use to challenge the oppression, the dismal condition of our people before us. It's a dismal, terrible condition. And so I think that's what we have to remember. Lately I've been struggling. I want to be as honest as I can. I've been struggling with the term Black Lives Matters. And that's because, to me, it sounds like Black American Lives Matters. And we have to start, if we remember where we're from, we can connect to people all around the world and increase our power, increase our institutions, increase our understandings. And I think from there, at least, is where I would start, where I would begin. And I think that would help with the current situations that are going on in whether you're in Jamaica, whether you're in Haiti, with having government issues in the moment, whether you're in Nigeria or Ghana. I think that's where we start.
I mean, you're pushing us. You're pushing us to consider some things, and I appreciate you for it. I appreciate the reminder that we're Africana people, right? That we belong to African descended people and to people. There's a relationship between peoples here in the domestic Western United States context and on the continent. Dami, I need to push you though. You said some things that I'm sitting with, and I want to ask Matthew, respond. Did I hear Dami saying that there were particular benefits in white supremacy? Maybe that's not how you framed it, but maybe that's what I'm hearing. Matthew, benefits in white supremacy. Help me understand that, if you could respond to that.
Yeah, I think I would need some more clarity on that, like before I hop in.
Can I just say, Wilson, real quick, Dr. Okello, that in the spirit of being Afrocentric, right? Like the ability for Dami to trying to, out of the depths of horror that is white supremacy, pull out the positive. Mm-hmm. Like if there's nothing more like blacker than that, right? Like in the depths of like misery, it's like, what is the one good thing that we got out of white supremacy, right? It's the ability for us as Black folks, as Africans, to reach out, even though prior to colonialism we were doing that, right? We were already in different parts of the world, but to have our spaces and to have places throughout the entire world and to the entire region and to spread our knowledge, right? Again, still with the context of the horror of white supremacy, that is what I heard. So I'll leave it as.
Yeah, let me jump in.
Please.
I'm the brother who said it now.
Yeah, you are.
No, it's not that white supremacy is good. I'm saying in response to that horror, in response to the genocidal acts and colonialism, white supremacy, we have learned, as our sister said before, we have learned different, we have brought different styles, we brought art, music. I'm saying in our pain, in our horror, somehow beauty has been brought. And I'm saying white supremacy, they went too far. See, now they should have stopped a while ago with all the mischief, but they went too far. And now we say, oh, we over here now. Oh, bet we got some people over here now. We're not just in Africa, we all around, and now we can build some force, some authority. And we got some people in America at the moment. The so-called strongest, the strongest military nation in the world. Now if we gotta pass some laws over here, we gotta change some things over here. You got some of our people there, so they might be. We got people to infiltrate. And so that's what I mean, that in response to the plague and horror of white supremacy, the kind of death blow white supremacy attempts to bring on all of us, we have decided, some unconsciously, subconsciously, and subconsciously, to somehow find joy, somehow find peace, some breakthroughs, and some help to dismantle the forces that that brought us into this current situation, which has been white people for the most part, actually for 99% of the part.
Yeah, and I think thanks.
But then if you think about it, it also, I believe it's inherent in us, in our DNA. You know, I recently just watched the Black Church that Pastor Tim said was on PBS by Henry Louis Gates, and the slaves did exactly that. You know, the slave master wanted to convert the slaves into Christianity. They allowed them to become Christians, but then they took away the passages that would give them the hope to have the uprising that the Israelites had when they were able to leave Egypt. Inherently, we know how to find the best situation given the worst circumstances. The slaves did it, we're doing it. Who knows what's going to happen in the next 100 years? But I can guarantee you, what is in our DNA is going to find the best situation, because you will hear any old Black grandma but God, like, oh, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus, because we know how to hold on to things that are not tangible that somebody can take away, right? You can physically hurt me, but what I believe in mentally, you can't take that away unless I give you the power to. So to hear Dami say that, it's a way of us now in our modern day, we are saying that, okay, as white supremacists, like, this is what you're doing, but intellectually as Black folk, we're just like, hold up, we now have more resources than our ancestors did. We have platforms that we can now shame you on. We can put what you're doing out on platforms, right? So if a Karen does something, we can film it and put it on social, and best believe Karen is out of a job, because long gone are the days when people could say things to us and not get reprimanded for it. But because of our inherent need to keep going and to keep surviving, we have to always find the silver lining and to find the goodness in every situation, because if not, we're just going to crumble to the system. And who are we after that?
Giving us life, Alice. I appreciate your thoughts. I do want to take a moment to bring in Steph Oliveira. Thank you so much for joining us. I know technology can be strange some days, and so we're so excited to have you as a part of our conversation. And we're meditating right now. We're thinking through the possibilities within, or what Black folk in and across the diaspora have done in the wake of anti-Blackness, in the wake of white supremacy, what we have created in the midst of it. And so let me turn to you, Steph, to just bring you into the conversation. Talk to me about perhaps, we may have lost. Did we lose Steph?
White supremacy is crazy. Look what they're trying to do to us. Look what they're trying to do already.
They sense the power. They sense the power. Go ahead, Matt.
Step in just real quick. Yes, I just want to amen something that Howard Thurman says: by some strange but vastly powerful spirituality, the enslaved redeemed the religion that the slave master had profaned in their midst. And so there's a powerful history of that. Nanny Helen Burroughs' grandmother really correcting her by saying, I was not a slave, I was enslaved, right? They held my body, but they never enslaved my mind. And there's a power in that. And so I think about that, you know, like they gave us the blues and then we gave them B.B. King. They gave us, you know, Featherless Bones, and we gave them Buffalo Wild Wings. You know, they gave us Hell, and we gave them Howard and Hampton. They gave us Murder and Misery, and we gave them Morehouse and Morgan. They gave us 2 hours in a theater not too long ago, and we gave them Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. We've always been taking things and transmuting them. I think that the temptation is for us to get lured into the capitalistic machine that's behind this empire, right? The idea that not everything that is skinfolk is kinfolk. And there's a lot of people that race is not just the problem. There's an intersectional, classist, and sexist critique that we have to make to say that there's really only one color in America, and that's green. So we have to have a conversation about sort of many of us as Black people wanting to take part in the very oppression of our people, and then try to put a black face really on white supremacy. So
I appreciate you, Doctor.
Can I jump in on
Please.
that? Oh, Steph is back. Steph is back.
Welcome back, Steph. It's so good to have you. So as I was mentioning, we're meditating, we're thinking about what Black people have created, thinking about Black agency, if you will. And so talk to me really about the possibilities in Black creativity. What are the possibilities of Black creativity in this moment? How have Black people created in the shadow, in the wake of white supremacy? You might be muted. Not yet. Still muted.
This is why we need our own Black platform, so we know, because this is what happens. They try to mute a sister's voice.
Oh. Okay. Still can't hear you, and so if we could, we're not going to lose sight of you. We want to hear from you. We certainly want to hear from you, and so we'll circle back in just a minute as we think as we wait to hear from you. But as we do so, talk to me about what threatens Black power and imagination, Luckson. If we're thinking about agency and Black creativity, what are the threats right now to Black power, Black imagination, to Black institution building?
Great question. And I think Matt, Dr. Quainoo kind of got us started on talking about, is capitalism the way, right? Like, is that the way that we will create the world and the system of living that will bring us into a period of happiness from our soul? I think that is the question that we have to ask ourselves, because if it is via capitalism, right? And I think we can definitely have a conversation about race and the experience of Black and brown folks, especially Black folks in the United States. But we have to have a conversation about class also, right? And if we're talking about class, right, we understand that in a capitalist structure, right, you always have to have a working class. You always have to have poor people or people who will be exploited in order for just monetary advancement, right? So do we want to perpetuate the system that created the nation that we live in today? Is that what we want to be involved in? Is that how we want to kind of create our own continue to create our own agency, continue to create our own wealth? I think we have to really have that conversation, because the way in which it's practiced today, I can tell you that if we're going to utilize, and I truly believe that if that's the way that we're going to utilize, if we're going to try to utilize a Black dollar, we're going to try to use the economic system that's been created to create for our own, we're just going to, within ourselves, kind of perpetuate the problem that happens now, which, if it's not racism, it's class, right? And so I want to live in a world where everybody has equitable and equal opportunity for upward mobility and advancement, right? So I just want to make sure that we have that conversation first, because I think without really thinking about the ideology behind what Black advancement is, what Black success is, we will get lost in the way, and I don't think that'll be good. So I think really having that conversation versus is going to be very, very, very important.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for calling our attention to the workings of capitalism, right? And the ways in which people can get wrapped up in it, can be taken by it. Our lives are defined and structured by it in many ways. But you're calling us to think about also Black economics and perhaps a form of institution building. And so, Pastor Tim Quainoo, talk to me a little bit more about what are the threats, again, to Black power, to Black agency, to Black institution building. Luckson is pointing to capitalism. Your thoughts?
There are always going to be threats to power. To have power is to know that someone else wants it. And so when I was in Chicago, they used to tell me, we ain't new to this, we true to this. This is nothing new. We've been here before. We might have been born at night, but not last night. We know what it is to face trouble on every side, and yet to set our faces like flint and to understand that I'm going to run on and see what the end is going to be. It's not so much about looking out for the threats as it is recognizing that this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. You are not going to take out what has been divinely placed in me, the mark of creativity that I walk with, that I bear, the divine image that I carry cannot be overwhelmed or taken out, because like Auntie Maya Angelou says, still like dust, I'm going to rise anyway. So I think as we think about threats and what would seek to disarm or dismantle or destroy Black creativity or Black power, it's really the recognition, not so much of what stands against us, but the recognition that the power that stands with us is greater than the power, any power that could stand against us. And I want to go back to something that my brother Damilola said when he talked to us about the reality that Black folks are Black everywhere we are. So if you're Afro-Latinx, if you're Afro-Asian, Afro-European, wherever you are, you got an Afro, you're African. And as African people, part of our power is the recognition of our ability to be united. Right? Anything that would seek to divide us would ultimately spell our own doom. But it's our opportunity to recognize the opportunity, to recognize the potential, to recognize the possibility of unity, and recognizing we may not always see eye to eye, but we can fight to stand arm in arm. And with that arm in arm stance, we can brave any opposition that would dare rear its head against us, because greater are those that stand with us than those that would ever dare to try and oppose us.
That's a good word. That's a good word, brother. I appreciate your calling us to think about unity, to walk arm in arm. This building.
Can I?
Please, Dominic. Yeah.
That sounds all good, well and good, my brother. But
it sounds great.
I'm struggling with that when we see the dismal, catastrophic in terms of statistics of where Black people are, education, health, this, that. But we know all the statistics, right? And we're not even talking about Africa. We're not talking about Haiti. We're not talking about Jamaica. We're not talking about the Dominican Republic. In some ways, you could argue. It just seems that they've been winning, my brother. They've been winning. When I say they, I mean white people. Have been, not all white people, of course, but a good enough, a sufficient amount of them have been seeming to beat us down for so long. And so I wonder, where does this kind of messianic feeling, this kind of hope from above come from? Because I'm struggling. I guess a lot of us, especially in the era we're in now, are struggling to see that. I think this is somewhat of an era, maybe a Black pessimism. I think it's difficult for us to reach that place where we feel like we can win. It feels like the best we can do is fight, but maybe never win per se.
Well,
if you think of how history is told, most of the time history is told from the point of the victor, the person who has won. If you look into what the white people did here, what the colonialists did in Africa, they made sure to get rid of whatever history we had. They burnt down our libraries. They burnt down our churches. They got rid of the deities that we held true to. A lot of us, and then for a moment in time, our language has evolved so fast that I think of my grandmother when she was alive. She spoke a dialect of Luo that I couldn't understand, but my parents could. And so our language has changed so fast, but also the people in power have made sure that the resources we need to empower ourselves, the same way how the slave masters made sure to get rid of the Bible verses and the stories in the Bible to empower us. If we think of right now, I didn't know so much about Black Americans until I stepped into African American studies class. And I was like, wait, Black people did this? They created this? Like, how was this possible? Because they have, as long as they can suppress the information that we need to intellectually know that we have what it takes to beat them, on the outside, it looks like, yes, they're constantly winning, but it is the fear of us uniting together, because historically, as Tim eloquently said, when we are united, you cannot stand, you cannot, come against us. But for as long as you do not show us how we have been united, for as long as you show us images of our leaders being killed, so you think of Malcolm X to Martin Luther King, you think of like, okay, well, if I stand up, they're gonna get rid of me. But there is power in numbers, so we cannot wait to have that one person come up, right? And I think that we're now, unfortunately, we are living in a time where we are thinking of ourselves and we don't think of the collective good. Because if I was alive in the 50s and 60s, and if I was a well-off Black person, I don't know if I would think, how we think now. Because right now it's all about, as long as it doesn't affect me and mine, I can turn a blind eye to it. And so until we can start feeling the pain, regardless of the class that we're in, regardless of what we believe in our faith, regardless of how much we are educated and how much we make, for as long as we can say that we are still being oppressed and we can come together, that's how we can start to win. But if we as ourselves in our own communities start to question that, it makes it hard for us to even come up and have this uprising and be like, well, how are we going to? Because it'd be like, well, this doesn't really affect me. It's like, I'm in New York. That's a Chicago thing. That's a Florida,
Yeah, Alice, what I hear you saying is that there's some capacity in our community to advance a different type of education, right? And so as we dream with me for just a minute, I want to talk about the possibilities within education. What does a Black education, what does it mean to center Blackness in education look like, right, for us moving forward? And anyone can jump in on this one.
I'll jump in quickly. Part of Black legacy and heritage is understanding the lineage from whence we come, is understanding that that there's a false narrative out there that Black people in America have no history, and it's simply not true. And I think that an increase in Black education and Afrocentric education is a key to dismantling such myths and lies, and understanding that when you equip young Black minds with the stories of triumph that belong to Black people for decades, thousands of years, many generations, it all of a sudden begins to shift the image that we look to as we begin that self-construction in our early days. So recognizing that Afrocentric curriculum is not something that can be picked and chosen over. It has to be a staple of all American curriculum. We can't have schools that choose whether or not they're going to teach Black issues and talk about Black history and address the many contributions of Black Americans and Black folk throughout the diaspora that have influenced America in her current state.
I appreciate that note, Pastor. Go ahead, Luckson.
Yeah, I think what Pastor Quainoo just mentioned, I think is very, very important. I think when we like use history to contextualize how we got to this point where folks feel like there is a choice to talk about Black history, which is American history, or you have students who have to, here in Providence, who have to protest and rally to even get ethnic studies as part of their curriculum. I think about a pre-Brown versus Board world, right, where you did have institutions where it was schools that were predominantly Black, right? Where there was an ability for educators who were Black to teach about Blackness, right? The freedom to teach about Blackness, right? Where there was no there was no guidelines of teaching about the American Revolution and thinking about Greek mythology. Although these things are very important, I think when we think about integration and the things that the things that allowed us to lose out on, I think about Black studies and this idea of teaching Blackness in a way that is free, right? And so in the world where education is marred with incentives and testing and polishing and this idea of that the career pipeline, often again, which kind of feeds into this idea of capitalism itself, right? Like, I really do truly think we lost a sense of Black education and how we can really teach ourselves what we need to know for ourselves first, right? I think it's about educating what we need to know in this battle between integration and segregation. So that's what I just automatically thought about when Tim was talking.
You both highlight some really important points, and I see you, Pastor Matthew. I'm actually coming to you right now, and I actually want to trouble this just a little bit. I agree with Pastor Tim Quainoo. I agree with Luckson. And what if I told you I don't believe in white institutions' capacity to teach the fullness of Black people, to center Blackness completely, right? And I think you all they understand that, right? So Matthew, what do we do in the wake of that?
Well, I have a word for URI, okay? Because URI is famous for conversations without confrontation, right? URI is famous for Black History Months. URI is famous for bringing in great speakers like Ibram Kendi to talk about how to be anti-racist, which really puts the onus on Black people. So we really get sort of re-enslaved to sort of make white people less racist. And so that buys into that same sort of narrative of valorizing Black suffering, right? Which we have to be very careful about that. The whole idea of us taking the shorter end of the stick and making something out of it. So I think that URI needs to put their money where their mouth is, right? Just like white institutions don't have a conversation about Black history without a conversation, a concomitant conversation about reparations, right? Ooh. So let's not act like this is a cold hands and sing kumbaya moment. This is about saying, hey, there have been wrongs that can be counted, right? That's why Du Bois wrote The Suppression of the Slave Trade. We can actually count. There's statistics to count how much money was lost, right? In 1860, Black bodies were more valuable than the entire American GDP. Let's talk money. Right. And I think that that's something that has to happen. Don't talk about Black history and then treat Black professors systemically underpaying them. And then the last thing I want to talk about just real quick is that Black culture needs to problematize the Black male messianic figure. Right. And this is sort of where I was going to about the intersectionality. We come from a people that lift every voice. Right. And so I think it's time that and there's a great scholar, Candace Bimbo, she says these words that oftentimes Black cisgendered men have become the white people of the Black community, right? And so we have to talk about decentralizing what it looks like for this normative Martin Luther King valorized male-centeredness. We've got to start looking at Black women. I'm wearing my Black Women Matter shirt. Please note that this panel had more women, including Steph, on it, right? So we just have to problematize how Black men oftentimes want to dominate these spaces, and we've got to be more intentional about lifting every single voice up, every single voice, not echoes in the word of Cornel West, but every single voice.
Good word, brother. That's a good word. Good word. Dami, thoughts?
What happened? What did you say Dami for? What did you say Dami for?
He asked you for your thoughts.
Thoughts are
they say a lot of powerful stuff, my brother.
Can I say something?
Alice, go
being the only female on this, it's interesting because, as you said, right now everything is very much about when we think about Blackness, we think about the Black male, and even if you go as far as the Black Lives Matters movement, you have more people out, like there's more outrage when a Black man dies than when a woman dies. But the reality is more of us are educated and more better off economically than our brothers. But for some reason, we have been taught to diminish our success and our intellect to make them feel like the man, because if we go back to the slaves, you know, they were stripped of their manhood. So as women, you know, when the man came home, we had to make him feel like the man. And now we're living in a time when it's like, we're no longer in slave trade times, but still, as women, we have a long, my goodness, we have such a long way to go. But that conversation needs to be had before we can even have it outside of the community. It needs to be had inside the community. And then we need to look at our institutions. We need to look into why is it that when you go to a place of faith, most people at the pulpit or whoever is passing you the message does not look like me. We have very few women preachers. When we go to colleges, we have very few women professors, yet we are more educated than our men, you know? And it's like, where are we going wrong? How is it that we are able to raise strong Black women like myself, as I believe my mother raised me and the other females in my family, but then at some point we're told, okay, you're too much. You need to come back down. You need to come back down because the Black man hasn't yet accepted that it is okay for a Black woman to be more. Because if we're thinking of equality, how can we talk about equality when even as women, we're still trying to get a seat at the table? Look at this panel.
That's right.
As a kid say, heard.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant and so true. And now as I'm thinking about what it means for us to engage in dialogue, some of the intra-community dialogue that you're calling us to think about, the ways in which we can confront white cis patriarchy in the ways that sort of infiltrates Black communities, the way it positions Black peoples against one another, the ways it is always affecting Black women in particular ways, right? The racialized and gendered ways in which for much of our history, there wasn't a frame to sort of think about the pain of Black women, and both you know, kind of external to the community, but also inside. And so thank you for an important reminder of, again, the intra-community conversations that certainly need to be ongoing. As we close in on our time, we want to look to Leah to just invite questions from the audience for our panel. If you have questions for our brilliant panel on this evening, please do feel free to post them in the chat or to let us know. So we do have one question from Mr. Washington. I love it. Whatever they give us, we turn it into a positive. But how long are we supposed to keep putting up with it? Is the end game equality for all?
If I can quote, if anybody's ever seen the show, I like quoting shows. If you ever seen the show Scandal, there's this Black character named Rowan, and he likes to tell his daughter, who's Olivia Pope in the show, get you some power. So at least like for my trek, I think from undergrad to where I am in law school, I think we have to not necessarily put equality on the side because that's important. We definitely have to talk about equity and equality, as people have pointed about when it comes to our Black trans people, our Black gay folk, Black women, Black folk all over, Black people that also in different countries. But I think we have to, and this is such a difficult thing to say. I think we have to push for power. I think we have to push to get economic and political power wherever we are. And that for me, and I know I'm really harping on this Afrocentric theme, but for me, it sounds like bilateral agreements between African countries, And it seems to me, going back to the motherland, and not as only a cultural trip, but also maybe finding some way that African Americans and Jamaicans and Haitians will have the ability to live there, to get even maybe a stipend or so, or jobs. Like, for me, it sounds like we have to, it rings for me the Black Panther, Black Power type of sound. We have to increase our power wherever we are in order to affect change. I think Black people have always done especially African Americans, have done an amazing job of talking about love and creating Black love. And while that's centered and while that's important, we also have to continue creating Black equity, as well as creating more power as a people wherever we are. And I think that, for me, is where I think we need to kind of reorganize our thinking, reorganize ourselves.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think it's so important. Again, this narrative of valorizing Black suffering needs to stop, right? So we talk about the Black church mothers, right, that are down in the basement frying chicken. They built these buildings frying, doing fish fries and frying chicken. And we love to tell the stories about the mothers and how they've done so much for us. And yet we are literally talking about a system of oppressing women in the Black church and trying to valorize it. We've got to stop valorizing Black suffering, right? We got to start talking about Black self-care, Black soul care. We got to start talking about Black therapy, right? That it's okay to have Jesus and a therapist. We got to talk about Black mental health. We got to talk about just prospering as a people. And then I think we also need to there's got to be, I'm going back to this because I think that we really, really got to cut deep into this classist critique. We've got to cut deep into the money, because a lot of Black people, I'm thinking about the NBA, I'm thinking about the NFL, I'm thinking about college basketball, right? That we have these white owners that are billionaires, while Black bodies do all the work on the fields, get beaten up, and then thrown out. They're still laboring on fields with white owners. This is problematic, right? That we're not owning our own leagues again, right? And I think that that's what Luckson was saying about this sort of pre-integration moment, which really wasn't integration. It was really assimilation, right? So we just sort of weakened the Black coffee that we had, right? So I think it's so important that we think about investing in our own communities, HBCUs, right? I went to an HBCU after URI for a reason, because how can you say you support Black institutions, but you don't patronize any of them? You aren't a part of any of them, right? And so I think there has to be a pursuit of investing in ourselves, investing in our women, investing in the oppressed persons within our community, investing in our children, fighting against domestic violence, right? And verbal abuse, and all the myriad forms of abuse that oftentimes are projected, right? So we're projecting the pain that we experience of white supremacy back onto our people. We got to start talking about health and wholeness, eating right? So we don't have to keep eating the scraps, right? We don't have to keep eating all the food that we did on the plantation. We're eating ourselves to death, right? So we got to start talking about eating right and exercising, all of those things, as we pursue power and confront power and have the hard conversations that might even get physical, right? And that's something that I don't think that we're ready to talk about. Blessings.
And on the heels of that, my good brother, we have to also name the names of those that stand in the trenches, right? And this is where, at the University of Rhode Island, we're talking about the Dr. Shanette Harrises, we're talking about the Dr. Quainoos, we're talking about these people that have stood for Black students, have helped us when we were curled up in the corner, struggling through finals, didn't know if we were going to make it. And Cunnigans and right, these folk that stood on our side, the Dr. Gatiti, these are folks that have stood for Black students, and it's not just at URI, but it's folks all over the place. We need to name our church mothers and give platform and give power and recognize that what you said earlier, it's lifting every voice. We have to allow the multiplicity of voices and the multiplicity of perspectives. And this is where the strength in Africa uniting around her diasporic extensions becomes something very interesting, because if Africa could ever centralize her power in in our homeland, in our origin story, in the soil that birthed us. But now all of a sudden we have something that we can create, we can determine, we can set vision for that is large enough to house the various visions that represent such a beautiful connection and quilt of all of Blackness as it's displayed and expressed and represented all across the various regions of the world. It's important, it's imperative that we name the names of those that are fighting and that we aren't selective of the names that we like. Talking about institutions, the Black church has to allow room for the voices that we disagree with. The Black church has to allow room for the folks that don't fit our theologies. And that's not just the Black Christian church. Talk to you real quick. We're talking about Black spiritual spaces.
Yes, sir.
That have formed Black identities and ideologies that now have to make room for the fact that not all our ideologies were formed in the pew. Some of us were formed by the hip hop, formed in parks in New York with b-boys and rapping and graffiti. We have to allow for more than just one story of we shall overcome. Oh, we're going to overcome, but we're going to overcome with the multiplicity of tools and weapons that are at our disposal.
Come on
yes,
now.
sir.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
Come on, brother. Come on.
Well,
that's good.
Well, we can let that sit. We can let that sit, Pastor Quainoo. And so we are at time. Thank you for taking us here. Thank you all for taking us here. Your brilliant ruminations have given us plenty to chew on, to reflect on, to think about, and to reconsider. And so I want to just conclude final thoughts, final words as we conclude for this evening. Final thoughts, Luckson, in a minute or less, talk to us about what does it mean to move forward? What is the dream? What does a dream look like for you moving forward for Black peoples?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much again. Appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel. A couple of things I think about that I think that'll continue to help us move forward. Just the imagination of the world that we can live in, continue to push what the boundaries of that imagination, continue to allow us to really dream about true freedom and what freedom feels like. And I will always, and I love the perspective of bringing the Africa, our motherland, back into this conversation because it's very, very relevant. As a Nigerian-born individual, I really don't think that is the key to unlocking just like the Black freedom, whether it be economic, whether it be cultural, spiritual, whatever it is. Really thinking about how we can tap into Africa into helping African Americans here in the United States. Or just kind of supporting each other moving forward.
Powerful. Alice?
Firstly, thank you again for this wonderful opportunity. It's been amazing to hear all the different panelists. They are fantastic people. I just think that honestly, we need to start with ourselves and we need to think about the narrative that we're saying about ourselves and also the narrative that we are hearing and accepting that is being said about us. So we need to stop subscribing to what Hollywood is telling us or what the music industry is telling us who we are as Black people. We have that power within us because we can literally stop things. If we decided, you know what, we are going to boycott whatever it is, it's happened in the past, we can do it now. So if we just decide as individuals, as families, as communities, that we are going to change how we speak and we are going to speak words of encouragement and empowerment and not belittling and pointing fingers, then we can start to lift ourselves up because now I'm seeing a brother on the street and I'm just like, yo, brother, you can do it. You got it. Yo, sister, we're climbing. We got this. And leave doing the work now, knowing that it's going to take a while and we may not see the changes in our lifetime, but it has to start. So why not start now? Why not start with us?
Thank you, Alice. Dami.
Yeah, thank you for having me on here today. I think
we have to, and in Black, and it's sad going on this note, but we have to be ready to continue sacrificing for those who are currently living and for those who we only see when we're on the other side. And we have to keep doing that. We have to keep doing it. We have to sacrifice, gain more economic and political, social power, communal power, and that obviously is globalized, of course. And I think from there we can really start changing the way this world works for us. It's not just an American issue we have over here, and it's not just an Asian issue, but it's a global issue. At the same time, it's pretty I'm ending on a kind of a dismal note with environmental catastrophe going on in the world. We don't know how long we're going to have, but I think as long as we have, we continue fighting, we continue loving, we continue trying to seek for justice from our limited time from womb to tomb. So that's what I think.
Womb to tomb. Thank you so much. Pastor Quainoo, Matthew Quainoo.
Yes.
We'll conclude with Pastor Tim.
Thank you all so much for this generative conversation. I think I'll close here that ultimately what Cornel West lays out in Race Matters, that we need a moral reasoning, not just a racial reasoning, right? And I think that that's ultimately where we're going, that even when you think about teaching Black history, which is American history, that's been said, but why don't we teach white history too, right? I think that we should teach white history. There's a great video about this that says, yes, let's talk about the history of white supremacy. Let's talk about how the idea of storming the Capitol, when we keep hearing these narratives of American exceptionalism, that this is not us. No, in fact, no, this is us. So America needs more mirrors than windows, right? We're always talking about how great of a nation we are. We need some more mirror moments. And I think that that's what morality brings. It's not about left or right. It's about right or wrong, right? So even just thinking about that phrase that you can't get a GED, without learning American history, which is whitewashed, but then you can get a PhD without learning Black history, right? So that's wrong. And it's not just a racialized reasoning. That's a moral reasoning. So even when we see the Emmett Stills that keep happening right across our screens, we keep seeing Black people, men and women, boys and girls being excessively abused and brutalized by the police, right? That's an issue of morality. That's an issue of humanity. I don't care what color you are. There ought to be a content of character, right? In this age of the survival of the slickest, there ought to be some character. We need some people that can put ethics over expedience and stop trying to cash capitalistic checks that are morally bankrupt. That's ultimately what we have to do as a people. All of us, Black, white, whoever you are, we need some morality. And for me, that's based on Jesus Christ, who's the author and the finisher of my faith. But let's walk together, children. Let's keep singing this Lord's song in the strange land. Bless you.
I appreciate you, Pastor Quainoo. And then we'll conclude with Pastor Tim Quainoo.
Well, that was a good benediction right there. But I'll say this, and my sister Alice was talking about it, that it's around the table, and it's recognizing the value of breaking bread together, and that I don't just want to do a fish fry. I want you to own the lake. I want my people. I want my brothers and my sisters,
yes, sir,
and everybody in between. I want us all to be able to go out and have the freedom to scale our own mountains, to fish in our own lakes, and to enjoy the beauty of our rivers as they feed into the Atlantic Ocean from the other side, from the other view. And so I think that there is an Afrocentricity to our future. I think the future is bright. I think the horizons, the African horizons, are awash with hope and with light. And I will say, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the struggle here at home continues, but it does not continue in a vacuum. While we were marching in the streets in relation to police brutality here, our African sisters and brothers were marching in the streets of Nigeria and other places about police brutality there. And I think the sooner we recognize that our struggles, in the words of the great prophet Kendrick Lamar, we gonna be all right.
Y'all are dynamic. Y'all are dynamic. A pleasure, a gift to sit with you all. Again, it's been so long since I've had the opportunity to do so. Always a pleasure. Always learn so much, always grow so much. I look forward to just being in continued community with you all. And thank you all for your willingness to join us on this evening. Thank you for sharing your time and dreaming thinking with us about Black futures. And we want to thank again the College of Arts and Science. Thank you so much to Dr. Barber, to Dr. Vanessa Quainoo, everyone involved in constructing this evening. We are excited about the work that's happening at URI in Africana Studies, and we look forward to building and growing with you all into the future. Thank you all so much, and be well.